It's Roger once again, MUDFOSSIL University, once again looking at some work done by Brien Foerster, which we all, I'm sure you know who Brien Foerster is. He's quite well known. And he has this hidden Inca tours, and I've looked into a lot of stuff he does. Absolutely fabulous. If you could go on one of these, it sure would. He goes right up and he asks the questions. He knows the people to talk to. He knows the places to go. He knows he knows everything about this stuff. And the only thing he doesn't understand, or maybe he does understand it, but he's not capable, or not able to speak about it, because if he does, he will be isolated, as most of us that do speak of this are. But the things that he's looking at, I can understand now because of the research that I have done, but it's outside of the geological research, which does not address this whatsoever, and I do. So I'm going to show what these H blocks are all about. This is the only thing I'm going to go over. Usually I run off at the mouth for a long time, but this time I'm just going to do the H blocks, because I realize what they did here. This perplexed me greatly, but now I understand it. Okay, now this is, as you can see, Fuerte del Sempiata, Bolivia. Now, let's see what we are looking at here. All right. Well, what we are looking at is what they used and how they mined the material to make those H blocks. This was obviously some form of a high-tech vehicle with it's a heavy high-tech vehicle. It has tank tread, more or less. See this pattern running right here and over here, and these little treads? What this is doing is supporting some big piece of construction equipment that mined these slabs of wet, tendinous material after the flood. This was from a giant of some sort, or some giant creature, and this is tendon. And it's a porphyritic limestone. And they mined these slabs, and it was obviously wet when they did this, because they sunk in, and they could take these wet, because this was wet, that was wet, when they did this. That's my statement. Now, these walls are right directly behind where they were mining that stuff, and this is the kind of slabs that they were taking out. They fit together. Someone mentioned to me the other day, maybe they did this, as they took them out, they didn't come out exactly the right way, but they work fine to suppress earthquakes. I don't know, maybe that's true. They're still here. Now, you see this here? That right there, my friend, is the blood eroding from one of these rocks. Now, this apparently was either the blood vessel or was actually a bone interior to that particular. I mean, it was either muscle or tendon, one or the other. They came out wet, and as soon as they were putty state, and when they dried, they hardened up solid like this. They call it tender stone. And there's a lot of references to this. Even recently in the 1700s, they were excavating for the Palace of Justice or something in France, and they excavated tender stone. It came out nice and soft, and it hardened up in place. All right, so here's what I'm claiming. I'm claiming that there was a high-tech vehicle that cut slabs of this stuff off of here. They put it back in these walls, and also they cut these like chunks of putty. You see this red stuff here, and that little bit of red stuff there? I hope you can see that. Sometimes the camera doesn't pick this up, but that is what's called Leucine-Rich Proteins. It's red blood, slippery red blood that coats tendons, and that allows them to slide back and forth in these the fascia and synovial sheaths, and that gives you flexibility, and whatever this creature was, flexibility. Now, so we're going to see this red blood all over the place. So when I'm looking at these H blocks, I'm thinking they carved them, but they didn't carve them. I think they pressed them in a press. We know they had a high-tech equipment. We saw that with the high-tech vehicle tracks. We know they're cutting these things wet. We know that they erode into blood and stuff. I just showed you that a minute ago. I see no reason that they wouldn't go into forms and be crushed in there. Put another one in there, crush it in. You get the same blocks virtually every time. They might have had several different molds. They might not have been exactly identical, but they would be pretty close. And then they would have a whole batch of rows of holes in a lot of them. They can't explain. Well, I think those holes were there to evacuate the air as the pressure of the press came down. But I could never explain those H blocks. That was a killer for me. Let me show you exactly what my source of discontent was. Hold on. Okay, I'm just going to go real briefly over Brien's video here, some clips. But this was Puma Punku, and these H blocks and these fitted together boxes and slabs and things they have, they're very, very high-tech stuff. Now, anybody looking at them say, wow, how did they carve these thinking that those were stone? And when I looked at it, I said, they are stone. Those are natural stone. That is not ground up granite. And I will show you what ground up granite is. And originally I used to think, boy, they had to have been crushing them up with big machines. Well, no. When they were doing this, it was wet. It's just like running it through a meat grinder. I'll show you. It's absolutely amazing. But this was here, I can tell these are natural stones because of the way they, you see the lichen and all that stuff, that attracts to blood, and moss attracts to blood, and I can see the bloody spots in a lot of the blocks that he shows. And
more of the famous H blocks. And all of these precision cut stones, there's the weird left turn signal. Nobody knows what it actually represents.
Now, I'm going to explain to you about the magnetism. Now, I have the same thing in my mud fossils, and they are not. They're completely original. They're not reformed mud fossils like these are, made from flesh and tendons. But mine are the same. Give the same polarities, and these are just crushed together. I believe. I don't believe these are ground up granite, which I will show you very shortly what granite really is, and the reason they ground it all up was to remove the metals. I can almost prove that as well.
And here are some of the magnetic anomalies that we are studying. This is in the center of one of the H blocks. Notice the compass moves 180 degrees and then 90 degrees more.
Mine do all the same sort of things, and the reason is because the tendon balls that anchor into these fleshy things have a different magnetic signature than the surrounding flesh, and they twist all different directions.
And then becomes somewhat erratic. So no one understands fully what is going on with the magnetism here. It's not simply the fact that the stone contains magnetite. It means that the magnetism has been altered. Possibly it relates.
You see all the different colored spots here, and the different colors. That is that's flesh. That's from flesh, and these are the colors of blood. So it's not so ground up that it's completely homogeneous, but I will show you what actual granite is that is homogeneous. And they did make a lot of structures with granite. We think it was natural. On my counter, they sold me as natural granite. I'll show you. All right, that's granite. That's supposed to be granite right out of my countertop in my house. That's the only piece of metal that I can find virtually in the whole entire counter. And I mean, it's a good sized counter. It's like 32 feet of this counter, and that's it. And then I looked at it. I just kept looking at it with the magnifying glass and so forth. You know, that's just what I do. And I was intrigued. I'm looking at all these little tiny particulates that are ground up to these precise little sizes, and I'm thinking, how did they do this? Because that is from the vein blood. The red is from the arterial side blood, the red rusty blood. That's the FeO3. This is FeO2. That gets hard. That's why these are in chunks. The black is locked up in the veins because there's valves that keep them separate, little chunks of them, like little bamboo chunks all through your body of vein blood. Once it can't go backwards. That's the key. Once you die, it tries to go backwards. It can't. It gets stuck between these valves. Now, so they break these little black ones up. They're all over the place. All the white ones, these little chunks of white ones, that's tendinous and connective tissues and so forth. The clear ones are more into the bodily fluids and things like that, they sort of harden up into clear liquid silicates and so forth. Now, then they just ran this through a meat grinder when it was still tender. Like meat. Here it is. I mean, look at that. Because that perplexed the hell out of me. I said, how could they do this? How could they make that so perfectly homogeneous and crunched up in these little tiny exact different sizes? They're almost exactly the same size. So anyway, that perplexed me. That is because the rock was tender when they did this. They just ground it up through a grinder. Then they put it through alchemy. What they do is they run it through different fluids and liquids that have salts and acids, and it eats up all of the metals, and they surround them, and then they float them off, and they do sink them, and they do all kinds of different things to them. But they were very, very, very good with this kind of stuff, the alchemists. This was not so, they're better than the people that they do this stuff today, absolutely. They could do all kinds of things. And we just don't give any credit for what happened in the past. All these things are written about, but it's a very, very lot of reading and studying, and it's always been considered silly, so nobody's done it. So there's a huge field here to study these things. This is all written stuff, most of it. You know, it's always, like I say, it's been considered silly, but it is not silly. You see that? That's ground up, homogeneous. They call that granite, just happened naturally. No, absolutely not. This is ground up flesh. That's what it is. It's ground up flesh. And all they had to do to change the colors in here is throw a little ochre in there, or you know, or put some acids in there to bleach it out and take all of the different colors out. They could do anything with this. They could make it white. They could make it red. They could do all kinds of things. So granite is not what they think. And I have a paper on it I wrote a few years back. Hold on, see if I can find it. All right, this goes back a couple of years. Granite recrystallized crushed stone after metal removal. When they process rock for gold metal removal, it must be completely pulverized. Acids and such extract the metals. This is when I thought that they crushed it all up, but now I realize it was just all moist. Now, when you come down here, it's they used it as a mineral concrete. It was just like putty. They would need a binder or a fuser to make it glob back together. I have an Olmec head picture that shows it was molded, and it was molded from this stuff, not from basalt or any of that stuff. As a matter of fact, here's a link. Let's see what it says. All right, you don't have to go any further than this right here. There's the head. Now, there's the guy's hand, crushing it in there, forcing it into the mold. He went out, had too many certivases, and fell asleep. Came back, it was all fused solid. Now, that's the key. Apparently, they had some kind of a fuser in this, I would say. Otherwise, that guy could come back, and this could take years to harden up, you know, in my mind. But somehow it hardened up before he could come back and fix it. And here's his handprints, just as exactly like I'm showing. So, it's not basalt, it's not carved, and it's not giant. That's the guy's hand. That's the size of his hand pushing it in there. A giant made this, that's for a toy soldier. We have such a skewed reality, it's really comical, actually. All right, so what is basalt? Basalt's dark-colored, fine-grained igneous rock, mainly of plagioclase pyroxene minerals. It is an extrusive rock, means comes from lava and so forth. It's nearly impossible to see the individual minerals without magnification. Totally different than granite. Granite is intrusive. It's not supposed to be there. It's intruding, not where it's supposed to be. The results in a coarse, textured rock in which individual mineral grains are easily visible, which we saw them easily. The grains are quite large compared to basalt crystals. Granules are very well mixed, we saw that. Quite uniform, we saw that. Do not contain metals, we saw that to any normal degree. Rock does not come in this process form. That I can guarantee you. The rocks that are mud fossils do not come in that. Some sedimentary rocks, possibly. Now, these granite intrusions with no metals are often located next to orogenic mineral systems which contain all the metals in high proportions. And those are lungs and hearts and organs primarily that are in creatures, and they mine them for the metals that are in there. Mostly it's in the blood, in the lungs and the hearts, and in that area. Now, so what am I going to? How can I prove this? A worldwide average chemical composition granite by weight percent 2,485 analysis. They're all elements in granite. These are the elements they find. There is no precious metals here at all. Why is there no precious metals in granite? What are orogenic mineralized zones? They're hearts and lungs. The orogenic mineral system unites a diverse group of mineral deposits that form during orogenesis, which means life, and include gold, cobalt type, copper, gold, zinc, lead, all these different things. All right, the platinum, these are all the platinum groups. The precious metals. This is the only thing missing from granite is the platinum group called electrum back in those days. And my research indicates granite intrusions are likely the tailings from metal processing. That's all you can take away from this. All right, Brian's going to explain this gate, and then I'm going to explain what I think happened here.
Gate of the sun. Look how fresh and clean the front surface is. Look how eroded the back surface is. So this giant 10-ton block was likely lying face down for thousands of years. The cataclysm snapped it into two pieces as if it was styrofoam, and then the Tiwanaku people discovered it roughly 2,000 years ago, and they propped it back up, and they did the incise carving on the surface, almost like scratches. Nothing, technically speaking, as compared to the actual shaping of the stone itself. So that is Tiwanaku culture work on megalithic ancient stone.
Okay, you saw Brian's interpretation. This is my interpretation. That is a tendon. And this is a huge tendon that ran up. They took the centerpiece out of the midst of the tendon. This top is an abrupt transition. You see little white dots sticking through here, all this white stuff. As it comes around the front, you're going to see what an abrupt transition is. Tendinous, and then it gets into where it attaches to the muscle, and then you get into the blood and all these mineralized spots. And here it is right here. This, you see these bloody spots, all this different yellows and browns and black and red, all of that is blood. Now, this is the mineralization that holds the tendons into your muscles, which would be above. And this is what they call the abrupt transition, shown it many, many times. So my conclusion on this is that this was molded face down in a mold, stood back up. The other side was nice and clean, and this side is the side that shows all of where the blood and the abrupt transition was. And then the muscle would have gone up in this direction. Okay, my deep appreciation to Brien Foerster at Hidden Inca Tours. I have no affiliation with Brien or any of his work. I just comment on the things that he asks questions about, and they're very, very exciting to me. And I thank you very much, my friend.